Lay your project on a flat surface and you're going to carefully remove your knitting needle. Then you are going to pull your working yarn to undo your work until you go past the mistake that you made. Finish undoing at the right side of your work, just so that you can follow exactly what I'm doing. If you hold your project like this, your stitches will zigzag. On the side facing you, the working yarn from the ridges of V's will most likely have a loose piece of yarn behind them like this. Those loose pieces of yarn are the working yarn, and this means that when you undid all of your stitches, every other stitch, the ones that make the V ridges facing you, undid for the next row as well. Thread your embroidery needle with a piece of yarn about 12 inches long. Bring the needle through each of the stitches that make the raised V columns facing you, so you'll be bringing it through every other stitch. Now, we are going to undo each of the other stitches, the ones that make the valleys between the raised columns of V's facing you. These are going to be a bit trickier, so we'll do them slowly one by one. The first stitch will actually be really easy. Just pull the working yarn out and you'll have a loop. And place this loop on your needle with the right side on top. Now, when we undo the next stitch, you'll pull your working yarn slowly, and you'll see that you have a loop in the back, and facing you, you have a loose piece of yarn. So you're going to bring that loose piece of yarn through the loop to the back, creating a new loop. Just like that. And then you'll place this new loop on your needle with the right side of the loop on top facing you. Continue doing this with the rest of the stitches across the row. And undoing the last stitch of the row is always tricky. So in this case, I accidentally undo it a little too far. So the working yarn is attached to the top stitch on the right needle and completely came out of my last stitch on the left. So I'm just going to bring that working yarn through the last loop on the left. And then in this case only, I'm going to bring the left side of that loop on top of the needle so that the working yarn is facing me. Okay, so now we have all of the stitches safely on either the scrap piece of yarn or a needle, but we need all of them to be on the same needle. So this is kind of a little extra step, but it'll help you safely get all of your stitches together. So remove your embroidery needle from your scrap piece of yarn, and then grab another scrap piece of yarn about 12 inches long and thread it onto the embroidery needle. Then we're going to thread it through all of the stitches in sequential order. So we'll start with the first stitch on your knitting needle, going through towards the left. Then we'll bring it through the next stitch that's on your scrap piece of yarn and leave your scrap piece of yarn in that stitch for now as well. Then through the next stitch on the needle, through the next stitch on the scrap piece of yarn, and continue in this fashion until you get to the end of the needle. Now for the kind of fun part. Carefully remove your knitting needle from all of the stitches, and then we're going to remove that first scrap piece of yarn that's just through every other stitch in the front. And this will leave just that last scrap piece of yarn that's thread through every single stitch. Now we have all the stitches safely on the same piece of yarn. Now we need to put all the stitches on the same knitting needle. So grab a knitting needle and start putting your stitches on it in order. We're starting at the end that does not have the working yarn so that the top stitch on your needle will be attached to the working yarn. Now you're ready to start your project again.